Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm already back with another one of my walkthrough videos, and today I would like to show you Port Royal. Port Royal is a little card game from Pegasus Spiele. It's both English and German, and there was a first edition last year in Essen by the Austrian Game Museum. Back then it was called Händler der Karibik, so Traders or Merchants of the Caribbean. I think there were some small rule changes between the first and second edition. The game is by Alexander Pfister. It's for ages 8 and up. It plays 2 to 5 players in about 20 to 50 minutes. And it was a winner in the 2013 Game Designer competition held by the Game Academy Vienna. As I already said, this version from Pegasus is both English and German. There are rules in 2 languages. There is hardly any text in the game, basically only the names of the cards. The rest is done with icons, and those names are simply on there in both languages. And apparently this is the only version so far, at least according to Board Game Geek. Now, what's it about? It's of course set in the Caribbean. The players are traders in Port Royal, to be more specific, in the bustling harbour of Port Royal, and the players are hoping for the deal of their life. You play for victory points, and victory points are either earned by hiring characters. For that you need money. You get money by trading, or by going on an expedition, which requires certain characters with specific skill sets, and again you can hire those through money, so money plays a big part. There are certain interesting concepts in this game. One is a push your luck mechanic. Basically you're drawing cards from the deck, you can stop at any time, and if certain combinations of cards are revealed, then you turn ends immediately and you can't take any further actions. But if that doesn't happen, then you can take some of these cards, and also the other players will get to choose from the same selection. So you basically have to pay attention what you are revealing, and even if you don't want to stop, or you don't have to stop, it might still be a good idea to stop, because otherwise the other players might get too good a deal from the cards you don't take. What I would like to do now is show you a full 3-player game. Have fun! Our usual look at setup and components is really brief this time. So basically in the middle we have the deck of cards shuffled, and as you can see they all have coins on the back. There are no extra components for coins, so basically whenever you get a coin or spend one, you take a card or put it back. And each player starts with, well, 3 coins. And again, I have used colored markers from another game to reference the players better. And then we can already start. And let's just say that the blue player starts because he was the one to visit a harbor most recently. Your turn consists of 2 phases. The first is the discover phase, where you discover cards from the deck. And then you have a hire and trade phase, where you can interact with the cards that you've discovered. And the second phase is open to all players. So after the current player has taken cards from the harbor display, all other players also get a chance of taking cards from there. Okay, so let's just start by flipping up cards. This is a person card, it's a captain. We will be able to hire him later on for 4 coins. So before we're actually able to do that, we might need to earn more money. Then we have a pirate, a jester, and we can continue this as long as we like. If we ever have a certain combination of ships, then the town will be attacked and our turn is over, and we can't actually hire or trade cards from there. So that's the push your luck element, but since we don't have a single ship out here, let's just continue. A governor, and here's our first ship. It's a galleon and it's a black ship. If we were to trade with it, then we'd get 3 coins. Another thing is, if we continue and ever reveal another black ship, another galleon, then our turn is over, unless we can repel it, but since we don't have any pirates or sailors yet, we won't be able to repel it. Now, there are 10 ships of each color, so there are about 9 other black ships in that deck. Of course, minus the ones that might be under the coins of the different players. So now we have to ask ourselves, is it worth to continue pushing on? And yes, it is. Admiral, a jack of all trades. And the thing is, the more different colored ships you'll have in the harbor display when your trade and hire phase starts, the more cards you can actually take from there. So the more different colored ships you have, the higher the probability that you'll turn up another ship that will be the second of its color. But on the other hand, the more of those different colored ships you have, the more cards you can take. Now we have 2 different colored ships, but the thing is, we would need to have 4 differently colored ships to be able to take 2 cards from the display, and that is a bit too risky to wait for that. So now we declare the discover phase over, And since we have 0 to 3 differently colored ships in the harbor display, we get to take one of the cards. And we decide to take the galleon. When you take a ship, then you trade with it. So basically you get this amount of coins. So this is put to the discard pile. We get 3 coins. Put them in our personal display. And then in clockwise order, each other player gets to take 1 card. But if they do, they have to pay us 1 money in compensation. So the red player, he can't hire any of those characters because they would all need at least 4 gold. He could take the red ship, which will give him 1 coin, but then he'd have to pay us 1 coin in compensation, so the only thing he'd do is help us. So he decides not to do anything, and the yellow player as well. So all these cards are now put into the discard pile. And it's red player's turn. A flute in blue. A galleon in black. Jester. Okay, now we have 3 differently colored ships, 1 other color, and we'll be able to take 2 cards. Let's push for it. A trader. Now this one is interesting because he only costs $3, so we will be able to hire him right now, and he would increase our trade incomes from yellow ships in the future. Another trader. A priest. A sailor. And we're lucky, a red frigate. So now we have 4 differently colored ships, which would allow us to take 2 cards. So we declare our discover phase as over, and now we have a choice to make. We have 3 money at hand, and it would be best to trade with either the red, yellow or blue ship, because they would give us 3 coins. The question is, whom do we hire afterwards? Of course we could interact with both ships, but we need to start getting some characters. So we could either take the trader, or we could also take a sailor. The sailor has 1 saber, so we would be able to repel ships that only have 1 saber as well. So for example, this frigate has 6, but if we ever discover a ship that only has 1 saber, we'd be able to repel it, either for denying other players the possibility to trade with it, or to reduce the chance that we'll ever have 2 of the same color. So let's pick the one with the red. It would cost us 3, which is exactly what we have. So all of this gets discarded. And then if you take the red ship, we'd normally get 3, but we now have a trader, so we get 4, because all these cards go into effect immediately. And by the way, this number is victory points. The yellow player decides to take the yellow one, so he gets 3 coins. But one of those has to go to the red player for compensation. And yes, you can use the money that you get from ships to actually pay for the compensation. Now for the blue player, he already has 6 money, so taking money is not that interesting. He could take the yellow trader, of course. He could take the chest for 5. The chest would allow him, whenever the turn comes around him in the second phase and there are no cards to pick from in the display, then he'll get a coin. Or also if someone basically busts in the first phase and there is no second phase, then he'd also get a money. He decides to take the sailor. Red player's turn is over, and it's the yellow player's turn. Now this one is an expedition, or rather a call for expedition. It's put to the side, and whoever is able to complete this on his turn by discarding 2 characters, normally captains with these anchor symbol, he will get the card, which will give him an amount of coins and also victory points for the end of the game. So this one is set aside, and it will stay here until, well, somebody fulfills it. Frigate, pinnace, now let's push on. A flute. Getting a bit too risky, so let's stop. Let's take the flute. So we have 3. The blue player takes the yellow one, because then he'll get at least 1 money after he pays for compensation. And the red player is lucky, because there's a red ship, which we'll get 2 from now. And again, 1 goes to the yellow player for compensation. And the blue player, a skiff, a sailor, and another skiff, so that's 2 of the same color. He can't repel this one because that would need 3 sabers. He only has 1, so his turn immediately ends. The red player, galleon, pinnace, a skiff, but it's too risky. He decides to take this one, so he gets 3. And the other players don't take anything because of the compensation. Yellow. Trader for blue ships, trader for red ships, a blue ship. Yes, that would be a nice combo. The thing is, he's sitting on 10 money right now, so he'd rather have an expensive character to spend his money on. So let's continue. A captain, and we need 2 captains for that expedition up there, so that's nice. He decides to stop, so he hires the captain for 4. The blue player decides to take the flute to get 4 money. Now the red player could either take the red trader and get even more from the frigates, or diversify into blue, but he decides to take the other red trader. So he has to pay 3 for that, and also 1 compensation to yellow. The blue player, a settler, which is also useful in expeditions. A governor, which would allow you to take 1 card more from the display, which is very nice, but 8 is not something he can afford right now. Another settler, pinnace, trader for black ships, a flute. Another call for expedition. This one requires 2 settlers. Oh, there are 2 settlers. He could stop now, get 1 of them, and hope to get a second one soon. He could hope for 2 more ships of different colors. Let's actually try that. He has 1, so we're now looking for a black or a red ship. Another sailor. That is a tax increase. So whoever has 12 or more gold loses half. That affects nobody. And then whoever has the least victory points gets the gold. The red player has 2 already, but both blue and yellow have 1. So they get a gold each. And now the yellow player can actually afford the governor. And then we go on. Now this would be the second blue ship, but it only has 1 saber. So we can actually repel it. It goes to the discard pile, and we can continue on discovering. Another sailor, another captain, an admiral, which will give you 2 coins whenever it's your turn to take something from the harbor display and there are 5 or more cards there. And yes, a frigate. And he decides to take both settlers. That costs him 8, which is all of his money. And then, since it's his turn, he can fulfill any of the expeditions. This one, of course. He has to discard both of the settlers, but he gained 2 victory points because those were worth 2. This is worth 4. And he also gets 2 gold. The red player could take the frigate and get 5 money out of it, but the thing is, here's a captain. The yellow player already has a captain, and here's an expedition with 2 captains. So he decides to actually take that one, which will cost him 4, but 1 has to go to the blue player. And the yellow player decides to take the governor. So after 1 compensation, all of his money is gone. The red player needs money, so he is hoping for some red ships. Sailor, admiral, a mademoiselle, which would reduce the cost of other persons. Settler, captain, a settler, still waiting for those ships. A skiff, a sailor. Now the thing is, he needs money, of course. He would get money from the skiff. The yellow player doesn't have any money at all. So if he were to find a second ship, then that would actually give the yellow player the opportunity to get money. So he decides to stop, trade with the skiff, so he gets 2. The yellow player can't do anything. Blue player, however, can. He decides to hire a second sailor, and it's yellow's turn. Chester, pinnace. Now the thing is, he gets to take 1 card more, and we're also looking for a second captain. A flute. Now I guess we could simply take both of these ships and walk away with 4 money. Now let's push on. A priest, a skiff. Now we already have 3 different color cards here. If we would get a 4th one, then we'd be able to take 3 cards. Yeah. Another call for expedition, 2 captains and a settler. Trader for green ships. Another governor. And again, we're lucky. The priest isn't that interesting right now. We can't let the red player get that one, so we decided to take this for 2, the flute for 2, and then we hire the trader for 3. Blue player doesn't have any money, and the red player decides to take the pinnace. Blue, the pirate, which provides 2 sabers, frigate, and by the way, the skulls mean that a ship can't be repelled. Another call for expedition, 2 priests and a settler, a flute, and we bust again. We can't repel that one. And yes, counting cards or counting the color of ships might be a viable tactic here. The red player has a pinnace and another pinnace, so we're immediately done. Now those chesters would come in handy, but okay. Yellow player has a sailor, another governor, galleon, a skiff. We've run out of cards, so I have to do a quick reshuffling of the discard pile. And here we have another captain, which is what he was waiting for. So he decides to stop. He takes a skiff, which is 1 money, plus another one is 2. Plus his other 2 is enough to hire the captain. And then since it's his turn, he can discard both captains and get this expedition. which will give him 2 money again. So he's now at 5 points. The blue player could take the galleon, but he'd have to give the money to the yellow player. And the red player decides to hire the sailor and also give 1 to the yellow player. Blue. Pinnace. He decides to repel it. Frigate. Another frigate. He decides to repel it. A galleon. Lots of money here. A pinnace. He decides to repel it. Pirate. Another pinnace. He decides to repel it. Sailor. A frigate. He decides to repel it. Jack of all trades. And by the way, those provide any of the expedition resources you need. Pirate. Trader. A skiff. No, he's waiting for that 4th ship. Another expedition. Admiral. Mademoiselle. Another sailor. And here we are. A pinnace in yellow. So he decides to stop. He decides to take the frigate. So the red player doesn't get it. And then from the money he decides to hire yet another sailor. The red player takes the galleon. The yellow player could take up to 2 cards. First of all, he takes the skiff. So that's 4 money for him, thanks to the trader. And then he decides to hire the admiral for 5. Now he has to pay a second compensation because he's taking a second card. The red player has a priest, jester, skiff, another priest, which is interesting because we have this expedition, a pinnace, a flute, and once again we're lucky. So he's able to take 2 cards, takes a skiff, so the yellow player doesn't get it, and then he hires a priest. And now it's yellow's turn to take something from the harbor display. There are 5 or more cards in the harbor display, so he gets 2 coins first. The yellow player decides to take both the flute and the pinnace. That's a total of 5. 3 for him, and 2 for the red player. Blue would of course very much like to hire that priest, but he only has 4 money left, so he decides to take a galleon. The yellow player gets a mademoiselle, a settler, a skiff, and since he can already take 2 cards, thanks to his governor, he decides to leave it at that. First of all, he takes the skiff, so that's 4 gold, and then he decides to take the mademoiselle for 7. So from now on, he pays 1 less for each person. The blue player decides to take the settler for 4. And there's nothing left for the red player. The blue player has another sailor, another settler, a jester, a governor, a priest, an admiral, trader. Now, of course, he's looking for money. The thing is, by building such a big harbor display, he'll help the yellow player because of his admiral, but what can he do? Jack of all trades, galleon, tax increase. Nobody has to get rid of any money, but whoever has the most sabers, and that's actually him, will get 1 gold. A flute, a pinnace, another trader, another admiral, another trader, and here we go, a frigate. He decides to trade with the pinnace, and then for his 4 gold, he can hire a priest. The red player takes the frigate, so he gets 4 gold. 1 of course goes to the blue player as always. First of all, the yellow player gets 2 gold. He decides to take this trader. He only pays 2 thanks to his mademoiselle, but nevertheless he has to pay the blue player 1 gold. And then he takes the flute, which will now give him 4. The red player, trade increase, whoever has the least victory points. The blue player has 9, the red player has 5, the yellow player also has 9, so the red player gets a gold. A flute, captain, and he actually decides to stop. He decides to take the captain. Then the yellow player doesn't get 2 money, but he still takes the flute, so he'll get 3, and it seems I have to reshuffle. The yellow player gets a priest, a trader, and he actually decides to stop because he could hire both for a total of 5 only, and then the other players won't get anything, especially he doesn't want the blue player to get this priest, because then the blue player would be able to go on that expedition. So he's now already at 11 points, and just as a reminder, the game goes until somebody has 12. The blue player gets a galleon. Again, tax increase. So again, the red player will get 1 gold. A frigate. Now the thing is, he really wants a priest, and the priest would cost 4, and he only has 3. So the best chance he has is to wait for 4 ships, so he can get 1 ship and a priest, if there should be one. So let's continue. Okay, here's our 3rd ship already. Here's our priest, very lucky. So all we need now is a blue or a yellow ship. And here we go. So, very lucky indeed. he decides to trade with the flute, because that would give the yellow player a bonus. So 3 gold for him. Then he hires a priest for 4. And then he can discard both his priests and a settler to claim this expedition over here. He gets 2 gold. And since he has now 13 points, the end of the game is triggered, so red and yellow will still get a turn. But first, of course, the red player can still buy something, so he decides to get the frigate, of course. It'll give him 4. The yellow player can get both ships, so with his trader he'll get 4 and the blue player will get 2. The red player is looking for a settler. And since that is his only chance to get at least some points, he decides to just push on. And he is unlucky, so that's a total bust. And finally the yellow player. He has 1 priest, so he would probably benefit from getting another one for that expedition. First of all, we have a tax increase. Again, the red player will get 1 gold. No, actually, if you were to hire that pirate, it would give him 3 victory points. And then together with his 11 he would be at 14 and he would actually beat the blue player. The problem is that guy costs 9 and he only has 5 at the moment, so he definitely has to push on. Another mademoiselle. Admiral. Okay, now things are getting interesting. There are 5 cards now, so if he were to stop his discover phase now, he would get 2 coins from his admiral, so he would be at 7. He could then decide to trade with the flute, and together with his trader that would give him 2, so he'd be at 9. He could hire the pirate for 8 and he'd have 14 points. And then the blue player has only 7 money, so he can't hire the admiral and also pay the compensation, and he can't hire the mademoiselle either, so that's probably the way to go. He decides to start the higher trading phase. First he gets 2 coins from his admiral. Then he trades as first card with a flute. He gets 2 money. He pays 8 to hire the pirate. He's done. The blue player just doesn't have enough. And then the red player can still hire the mademoiselle by paying 9. So we're done. Blue still has his 13 points. Red is now at 9. And yellow is at 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 14. Making him the overall winner. And that was a full 3-player game of Port Royal. One final remark about the different player counts. If you play with 5 players and with 5 players only, this expedition will be possible to fulfill from the beginning of the game, so it isn't even a stack, and you can see it has a different background, so it is always there. Apart from that, the game plays the same with all player counts. I hope you enjoyed the walkthrough of Port Royal. Hopefully I could show you that this is a very easy game to play. There aren't that many rules and the 2 phases of your turn are pretty straightforward. It also plays rather quick, and even if someone takes longer time to reveal cards into the harbor display, then the other players are still involved because they're hoping that something will be left for them and they can also already decide which cards to take. Hopefully you've also seen how interactive the game is. If you're the active player revealing cards, you're not only looking for the things you can use, you also have to bear in mind what the other players can use and which cards they could take, especially if they have traders, mademoiselles, governors or admirals, so basically every single card that is not used for the expeditions. You've seen the push your luck mechanism at work. For some players it worked out well, for some players it didn't, and I guess that's already all there is to say about this game. So, thank you for watching, have fun playing, and until next time, bye bye.